The night was heavy with silence until her scream tore it apart, a sound of raw fear and heartbreak that seemed to shake the thin walls of the apartment. She clutched her child tightly against her chest, trembling, every breath broken. The door rattled as he stormed out, slamming it so hard the echoes lingered like thunder in a small storm. The child whimpered, confused and frightened, burying a face into her shoulder as she whispered promises of safety she was unsure she could keep. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance, mixing with the ringing in her ears, making the air feel thick with danger and despair. The weight of betrayal pressed against her chest, heavier than the child in her arms. Her heart raced, pounding in uneven beats, every thought circling around the same desperate plea. Survive this moment, protect what matters most. Outside the door, footsteps retreated, each one leaving behind a scar of abandonment that would never heal. Her world had just been split wide open, and nothing would ever be the same again. Morning light pierced through thin curtains, painting the apartment in muted gray as she sat at the edge of her bed, staring into nothing. The weight of last night pressed on her chest like an anchor, yet her son's soft breathing reminded her why she must rise. Her reflection in the cracked mirror looked older, worn by years of sacrifices she could no longer count. The silence was deafening, but inside her mind screamed with doubt and fear. She thought of the slammed door, of betrayal written on his face, of the emptiness left behind. Her son shifted in sleep, a small smile tugging at his lips, innocent to the battles she would fight for him. She whispered to herself that she could endure anything, even this. But deep inside, she felt the creeping terror of a world collapsing faster than she could hold it together. She brewed coffee with trembling hands, the bitter smell filling the small kitchen like smoke. Every sound seemed louder, the drip of water, the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking clock that mocked her racing heartbeat. She thought of calling someone, but shame strangled her words before they could form. Her friend's number sat on the table, scribbled on a scrap of paper, but trust felt dangerous now. Alex's tiny footsteps padded into the room, his eyes wide with innocence and sleep. She smiled faintly, masking despair behind the mask of a mother's duty. "Everything will be okay," she whispered softly, though her voice cracked like broken glass. He nodded without question, unaware of the storm that threatened to shatter their fragile peace. The walls seemed closer than ever as she prepared Alex's breakfast, the clatter of dishes sounding like gunshots in the silence. He chattered about school, his innocent words like sunlight piercing through the storm in her mind. She forced a smile, laughing at the right moments, hiding her trembling hands behind the cereal box. Every second was an act, every word a shield to protect him from truth. Yet her eyes kept drifting to the door, to the memory of last night's slam. Betrayal seeped into the room like smoke, suffocating her resolve. She told herself she would endure, that today she would stand taller, even if her soul was crumbling. The boy's laughter lifted her heart for a fleeting moment, reminding her of why she must never give up. She stood by the window, watching the city stir to life beyond the glass, streaked with last night's rain. Cars honked distantly, neighbors shuffled about, the world uncaring of her private collapse. Alex played quietly on the floor, his toy cars crashing into each other in blissful ignorance of reality. She pressed her palm against the cool glass, as if grounding herself against the chaos outside. The reflection staring back was a stranger, weary, wounded, yet burning with the faint spark of determination. She whispered, promises no one could hear, vows born from desperation and love. The storm had begun, and though she was broken, she refused to let her child drown in its waves. The alarm buzzed mercilessly, dragging her from restless dreams into another day of survival. She moved through the small apartment quickly, dressing for work while glancing at the clock that always seemed ahead of her. Alex sat at the table, swinging his legs, humming softly as he ate toast, unaware of the ticking clock pressing her heart. She reminded herself that every hour she worked was for him. Every sacrifice carved out a future she hoped would be better. As she packed his school bag, she tucked in a small note, a secret message of love to carry him through the day. She kissed his forehead, inhaling the comfort of his innocence before leading him out the door. On the bus ride to work, the world blurred past her tired eyes, each stranger a reflection of lives moving forward, while hers felt caught in an endless loop of struggle. Yet inside a voice whispered, "Keep going for him." The office buzzed with chatter and ringing phones, but she felt like a ghost walking among the living. Papers piled on her desk, each sheet a reminder of deadlines she could barely manage. Her supervisor's sharp eyes darted her way, a silent judgment that tightened the knot in her chest. She typed furiously, fingers aching while whispers from co-workers pricked at her like needles. She thought of Alex at school, wondering if he was smiling, wondering if he missed her. Every keystroke was a battle against exhaustion, every call answered a shield against failure. She swallowed her fear and forced her voice to sound steady, but inside she trembled. Each hour felt stolen, each minute survived through sheer will. Still, she told herself she could not break, not here, not now, not when everything depended on her holding it together. By lunchtime she escaped to the break room, clutching a paper cup of coffee like it was armor. She sat in silence at the corner table, avoiding the chatter that floated around her like smoke. A friend approached, offering a smile that barely softened her exhaustion. She wanted to confide, to release the weight pressing on her chest, but trust felt fragile, too easily shattered. So she smiled back, hiding the storm behind practiced calm. Her phone buzzed with a picture from Alex's teacher, him holding up a drawing, grinning proudly. Tears stung her eyes, but she blinked them away before they could fall. She whispered under her breath that she would keep fighting, no matter how heavy the burden. Hope was fragile, but it was still hers to cling to. The day dragged on, each hour a mountain climbed with leaden feet. By the time she clocked out, the sky outside was painted with gray clouds heavy with rain. The bus was crowded, bodies pressed close, the air thick with tired sighs. She stared out the window, watching raindrops race down the glass, each one reflecting a piece of her fractured spirit. Alex's voice echoed in her mind, laughter like a light that pierced the gloom. She clung to that sound, holding it close as the city blurred by. A man offered her his seat, but she shook her head, her pride heavier than her aching legs. The ride home felt endless, yet each stop brought her closer to what mattered most. She whispered silently that she would endure, she must endure. Home smelled faintly of reheated leftovers, the aroma thin but comforting. Alex ran into her arms, his laughter chasing away the fatigue that clung to her bones. She held him tight, inhaling the scent of crayons and soap, the reminder of why she endured every hardship. He showed her his drawing, lines crooked but filled with love, and she praised it as though it were a masterpiece. Together they sat on the floor, toy cars and laughter filling the room with warmth that outshone the darkness outside. She knew the world would test her again tomorrow, that betrayal still lingered like a shadow, but tonight she let herself breathe. In that fleeting moment, she was not broken. She was simply his mother, and that was enough to keep her fighting. The envelope lay heavy in her hands, its edges cutting into her skin as if mocking her fear. Inside, the court summons spelled out the words she dreaded most: custody hearing. Her heart pounded, as if the paper itself carried the weight of her future. Betrayal wasn't over, it had just begun, sharpened by the cruelty of legal threats. Alex played nearby, his laughter echoing like sunlight she could not hold on to. She tucked the papers away quickly, forcing her voice steady when he asked if she was okay. The walls of the apartment felt smaller, the air thicker, each breath harder to take. She had fought battles alone before, but this one promised to shatter everything. Still, deep within the fear, a spark flared. She would fight until her last breath, even if it broke her. At the lawyer's office, the walls loomed with shelves of books that promised justice but reeked of battles lost and won. She sat stiffly across the polished desk, trying to hide the tremor in her voice as she explained her fears. The lawyer's calm eyes betrayed no judgment, only questions that dug deeper than she wanted to answer. She confessed truths about her struggles, each word heavy with shame she carried too long. He nodded, making notes, speaking of rights and strategies, words that sounded strong but cold. She clutched her bag tightly, as if anchoring herself against the tide of uncertainty. Outside, the city roared, life moving on while her world narrowed to this fight. The papers were signed, the path chosen, and she knew there was no turning back now. That evening, a knock at the door broke the fragile calm of the apartment. She opened it to find her old friend standing there, someone she once trusted but now brought with them a shadow. The smile on their lips felt forced, their eyes carrying secrets she couldn't quite place. They spoke kindly, asking about her life, about Alex, about the weight she carried, yet each word seemed to cut. Something felt wrong, an undercurrent of betrayal in the way they avoided her gaze. She wanted to believe in their concern, but her instincts whispered warnings louder than their words. When they left, the air was heavier, as though they had taken more than they gave. She locked the door and held Alex close, silently vowing that trust was no longer free. The next day at work, the whispers grew louder. She overheard fragments of her personal life being dissected, twisted, and spread like poison through the office air. A trusted colleague had spoken, the betrayal sharp enough to cut through her already fragile composure. Her hands shook as she tried to type, her supervisor's eyes burning into her back as though waiting for her to fail. She clenched her jaw, swallowing anger, refusing to let them see her break. Alex's drawing sat tucked inside her bag, a reminder of the only voice that mattered. With every cruel whisper she endured, she told herself she would rise stronger, even if every wall seemed to close in. Betrayal had found her again, but it would not destroy her. Not this time. Late that night, Emma sat at the kitchen table, her hands gripping a mug of cold coffee. The silence was unbearable, filled only with the faint ticking of the wall clock. She replayed every word from the day, every betrayal, every moment of doubt, until her chest ached with the weight of it. Alex slept peacefully in the next room, his soft breathing a rhythm that anchored her to reality. She whispered to the shadows that she would not let him see her fall, that she would fight even if the world clawed at her from every side. Tears spilled freely now, but they carried a strange strength with them. She realized that pain was no longer her prison but her fuel. Tomorrow, she would rise stronger. Tomorrow, the fight would begin anew. The night was restless, haunted by memories she tried to bury, yet they clawed their way back with merciless precision. Emma sat by the window, staring at the reflection of her own hollow eyes, whispering that she was stronger than this. But the truth was undeniable. Fear had found her cracks. She remembered promises broken long ago, betrayal etched into her soul like scars that would never fade. Alex's voice called softly from the bedroom, pulling her back from the edge of despair. She forced a smile, reassured him, and tucked him back beneath his blanket, though her heart trembled. Alone again, she pressed her palm against the glass, vowing she would not let the past destroy their future. But the weight of her shame pressed heavily, and for the first time, she wondered if she was enough. Morning arrived harsh and unkind, the weight of sleeplessness clinging to her like chains. Emma dressed in silence, her hands trembling as she buttoned her blouse, knowing today she faced judgment not just from strangers, but from a system that questioned her worth. At the courthouse, the walls loomed tall, cold stone and steel, pressing down with silent authority. She clutched Alex's small hand tightly, whispering courage she barely felt. Inside, faces turned, eyes measured, every glance reminding her of how fragile her world was. The authority figure scanned her papers, voice clipped and detached, questioning her stability as though she were a number instead of a mother. Emma stood straighter, forcing her trembling to still. For Alex, she could not fall apart, not here, not now. The questions came sharp, cutting into her like blades disguised as words. They asked about late payments, long hours, missed opportunities, each one painting her as less than enough. Emma's voice quivered at first, but she steadied it, speaking of love, of sacrifice, of nights spent working 2 jobs to give Alex food and warmth. She saw her ex smirk across the room, the satisfaction in his eyes as he painted himself as stable, while twisting her struggles into failures. Rage boiled inside her, but she bit it back, knowing her silence could be mistaken for guilt. She breathed deeply, drawing strength from Alex's presence, and answered with truth. Her truth, flawed but real. The room shifted slightly, a flicker of doubt now on the judge's face. Emma felt the faint spark of fight ignite again. Back home that evening, exhaustion threatened to crush her, yet the silence was heavier than her body's ache. Emma sat at the table, Alex coloring beside her, his innocent chatter cutting through the fog of despair. She tried to smile, nodding along, but her mind replayed every question, every doubt cast on her as though she were nothing. She wondered if Alex saw the cracks in her armor, if he noticed how her hands shook when she reached for her cup. But then he showed her his drawing, a picture of the two of them hand in hand, smiling beneath a bright sun. Tears filled her eyes, but this time they were not from despair. They were from hope, fragile but alive. That small piece of paper was stronger than all the judgment she had endured. That night, when Alex was asleep, Emma finally allowed herself to break. She sat on the bathroom floor, knees pulled tight to her chest, sobs shaking her body as silence consumed her. The mirror above the sink reflected her broken state, eyes swollen, hair tangled, spirit worn thin. She thought of giving up, of letting the fight collapse around her, but then she heard the faintest sound of Alex turning in his sleep, his voice murmuring a dream. It was enough. She wiped her tears, stood slowly, and whispered to her reflection that she would not fail him. Tomorrow would hurt, and the days after too, but she had something no one else could take from her. She had love, and it was enough to keep her standing. The letter arrived unmarked, slipped beneath her door like a whisper from the past. Emma hesitated before opening it, her fingers trembling as she unfolded the page. The handwriting was familiar, one she hadn't seen in years, and her heart lurched. It spoke of regret, of watching from afar, of wanting to help her now, in her darkest fight. Her first instinct was suspicion. Why now, after so much absence, after so much silence? But as she read, tears blurred the words, the offer of help, undeniable. She sat in silence, the letter trembling in her hands, torn between anger and hope. The past had returned, and with it, a chance she never thought she'd see again. But trust was a dangerous gamble, and the cost of acceptance weighed heavily on her heart. The next day, Emma found herself walking to a cafe she once knew well, guided by instructions scrawled at the bottom of the letter. The city felt louder than ever, each step heavy with doubt. When she entered, her breath caught. Sitting at a corner table was her estranged sister, a face both familiar and foreign, lined with years apart. Their eyes locked, silence stretching like a chasm between them. Emma wanted to scream, to ask where she had been when she needed her most, but words stuck. Her sister's smile was tentative, fragile, carrying more apology than joy. Emma sat slowly, unsure if she was stepping into healing or another trap. The cafe buzzed around them, but in that moment, it was only the two of them, the past colliding with the present. The conversation was halting, filled with pauses heavier than words. Claire spoke of regrets, of choices that had pulled her away, of watching from the shadows while Emma carried burdens alone. Emma's anger simmered, her voice sharp at times, demanding why she was abandoned when she needed family the most. Claire did not defend herself, only nodded, tears glistening in her eyes as she admitted she had failed her. Yet she also spoke of knowing people, of having connections that could help in court, of doors Emma could not open alone. Trust battled with doubt inside Emma's chest. Could she let her back in? Could she allow herself to lean on someone who had once disappeared? Alex's future weighed against her pride, against her fear. And for the first time, Emma considered saying yes. That evening, Emma replayed every word, pacing the apartment with Alex asleep in the next room. Her heart screamed to reject the help, to close the door on the past, yet the letter and Claire's face lingered. She thought of the courtroom, of the smirk she had seen on her ex, of the whispers that cut into her at work. Alone she could endure, but could she win? She looked at Alex's sleeping form, his small body curled with peace she desperately wanted to protect. Her chest tightened as she realized the truth. This was no longer about her pride, but about his safety, his future. With trembling hands, she pulled the letter from the table again, whispering to herself that maybe she didn't have to fight alone anymore. The decision came with morning light, fragile yet resolute. Emma dialed Claire's number with fingers shaking, her breath shallow as the call connected. Her sister's voice on the other end was hesitant, almost breaking with relief when Emma said yes. For the first time in years, Emma allowed herself to lean into the possibility of family, even if it meant reopening wounds that had never healed. She looked at Alex, who beamed up at her when she said they'd have help now, his innocent trust strengthening her choice. It would not erase the years of pain, nor undo the betrayals of the past, but it carved a new path, one where she was not standing alone. She hung up, exhaling slowly, as if for the first time in forever, she could breathe again. The courtroom was a battlefield, and Emma felt the weight of every eye as she took her seat. Papers shuffled, voices murmured, and the air hung heavy with tension. Her ex sat across the room, confidence dripping from his smirk, his lawyer whispering strategy. Emma's pulse raced, her palms slick as she gripped the table. The lawyer beside her spoke of rights, of fairness, but all she heard was the echo of Alex's laughter, the reason she was here. She lifted her gaze to the judge, her voice quivering as she swore to tell the truth. And though fear threatened to choke her, she knew this was her war. Each breath steadied her, every beat of her heart reminding her of the child whose future depended on her courage. The questioning began, sharp and relentless, cutting at her resolve. They asked about her work hours, her income, her missed rent payments, as though her sacrifices were failures instead of proof of love. Emma's hands trembled, but her voice grew steadier with each word, speaking of the nights she worked until dawn, of the meals skipped so Alex never went hungry. Mark's lawyer pressed harder, twisting truth into accusation, painting her as unstable, unfit. She clenched her jaw, swallowing anger, her eyes darting to Alex sitting quietly in the gallery. His small frame, his trusting eyes filled her with fire. She raised her chin, refusing to crumble. For him, she would bleed words if she had to. Emma's lawyer rose, his voice calm but firm, peeling away the lies Mark had spun. He presented records, receipts, testimony of her dedication, each piece cutting into the false image her ex had crafted. Mark shifted in his seat, confidence faltering as the truth spread like cracks across his mask. Emma exhaled shakily, her chest tightening with relief as the tide began to shift. Still, she felt fragile, every nerve exposed, every scar revealed. The lawyer's words rang through the chamber. This was not a story of failure, but of sacrifice and love. And for the first time, Emma saw doubt flicker in the judge's eyes as he studied her. It wasn't victory yet, but it was hope, and hope was power. The cross-examination erupted like a storm. Mark's voice rose, painting Emma as unstable, his words venom sharpened by desperation. She listened, fists tight at her sides, as he hurled half-truths and outright lies. But then came the turn. Her lawyer asked the questions that revealed Mark's hidden debts, his late-night disappearances, his history of neglect. The smirk vanished from his face, replaced by anger, then fear. Emma's chest swelled with both fury and vindication, though her hands still shook. For years he had twisted her story, used her pain as a weapon, but here, before everyone, the truth cut him down. It was messy, brutal, and costly, but it was hers. When the gavel struck, silence swallowed the room. Emma exhaled, trembling, tears streaming unchecked as the weight of years lifted, though scars still remained. The ruling was not just legal, it was survival. A declaration that her sacrifices had meaning. Mark's face twisted in defeat, his eyes burning with venom, but she no longer feared him. She turned toward Alex, who rushed into her arms, his small body anchoring her in the moment. For the first time, she felt not just survival, but victory. It wasn't clean, it wasn't without pain, but it was theirs. The fight had broken her in places, but in holding her son, she knew she was unbreakable where it mattered most. The apartment was quiet that evening, filled only with the sound of Alex humming while he played. Emma sat at the table, papers scattered before her, proof of victory, yet reminders of the war she had fought. Her body ached, but her spirit though scarred, felt lighter. She whispered to herself that they were safe now, though the words trembled like fragile glass. Alex climbed onto her lap, wrapping his arms around her neck, asking if everything was truly okay. She kissed his forehead, smiling through tears, promising that no matter what came, they would face it together. The world had not given her peace, but she had carved out her own, one piece of love at a time. Morning brought a gentler light than she remembered in years. Emma brewed coffee, its warmth spreading through her hands as she watched Alex eat breakfast, with a joy she hadn't seen in so long. The air felt lighter, though shadows still lingered. Bills still piled on the counter, doubts still whispered in her chest, but for the first time, they didn't define her. Alex asked about their future, about school and games, and she answered with hope, painting possibilities instead of limitations. She realized redemption wasn't in the court ruling, but in these small, quiet moments where love was enough. Her strength was not measured by what she endured, but by what she protected. Later that week, Emma walked Alex to the park, his laughter ringing like bells as he ran ahead. She watched him play, his joy untethered, his innocence reclaimed piece by piece. Sitting on the bench, she let herself breathe, the fresh air filling her lungs with renewal. Other parents smiled, strangers unaware of the wars she had fought to stand here. She closed her eyes, whispering gratitude for the strength she had discovered, for the courage that had carried her through. When Alex called her name, waving with his toy plane, she stood and waved back. She knew the scars would never leave, but they no longer defined her. They had forged her. And for the first time she felt whole. That night, Emma stood at the window, looking at the city lights flickering like stars against the dark. The world felt less threatening, though the scars inside her still ached. She whispered a promise to the glass, not of perfection, but of perseverance. Alex's soft breathing filled the quiet, his small body safe in bed. She thought of the woman she once was, broken, fearful, drowning, and realized she had become someone new. Stronger, braver, unafraid to fight. She touched the glass with her palm, feeling the cool surface beneath her skin, a symbol of grounding. Tomorrow would bring challenges, but tonight, she allowed herself peace. Tonight, she believed. The final moment came quietly, without drama, without noise. Emma sat beside Alex as he slept, his small chest rising and falling, his lips curled into a peaceful smile. She brushed his hair gently, whispering promises only he would ever hear. "We're stronger now," she murmured, her voice steady, no longer broken. She leaned back, tears slipping down her cheeks, but this time they carried no weight, only release. Life would never be simple, but it no longer felt impossible. She smiled, truly smiled, and for the first time in years, the mask fell away. In that silence, with love stronger than fear, she found redemption.